It's always that time of year where there's a lot of hope, a lot of new players, some guys that have developed, and it's their time. And you certainly have an opportunity to set your goals for your team to improve, to elevate the standards. And we certainly have done a bunch of that as well. But with that being said, I'll open up the floor to questions. From a goal standpoint, big picture, number one would be discipline. I think you saw it last year. We really hurt ourselves with the amount of penalties that we had, and that's on us. We got to do a better job coaching guys. We got to do a better job emphasizing those things and creating scenarios that put our players in situations that allow them to practice that. I think film study is really important as well. I think secondly, we'd like to be the most fundamentally sound team that we can be. You can never be good enough at technique. You can never have enough polish on your craft, and we certainly want to be that team that technically is on point 100% of the time. So that being said, the amount of individual periods and technical work periods will increase. You'll see we'll even start practice with a turnover period and a ball security tackling period, a lot like the New England Patriots use. Good team to kind of mimic, right? They do a pretty decent job. So I think that's important to mention. It's important to mention another goal for us is to show consistency in performance. We were up and down, more specifically when we were on the road. And we have to be a better football team when the environment changes and when everything isn't perfect. And we also want to establish a culture of excellence. We do. And you'll hear our players say it a bunch, saying that we want to, in essence, develop an intolerance for anything or anyone that does not uphold the standards of our culture. And it's important to our guys to make being a Duck a very important, a very difficult club to be a member of because of the sacrifices that we make and how hard we work. And that relates to being, a guy in the classroom, a student athlete, out in the community, as well as a football player.
Justin Herbert and Troy Dyer going into their third years as starters. What do you expect from those guys during our spring ball? Or what kind of things that those guys need to work on when they've kind of entrenched themselves?
Yeah, the common answer is people always want to say leadership. That's kind of a given. We want to see that. But honestly, I expect these guys to be much better at the end of spring than they are going into spring. This is a development game. Football always will be about development, and both guys are really good football players. And they've had a tremendous impact on this football team and in the community as well. But they're just scratching the surface, in our opinion. Both these guys have their best days ahead of them. They're certainly students of the game. They work on their craft constantly, and we expect them to take that next step. Good players must eventually become great players and dominant players, and that's what these guys need to become.
Based on kind of your observations of the offseason conditioning and what you've heard from the coaches who've been running that, are there some guys you think could be primed to kind of take on some bigger roles you're excited about seeing in spring ball?
I expect a lot. It's hard to mention, a couple. I do want to say Dylan Mitchell really stands out. I'd like to say Diamador Lenoir really stands out as a name that continues to pop up. I think Justin Hollins and Jalen Jelks are a couple of really, I would call them the most disruptive players, some of the most disruptive players in our conference, and their bodies are changing, they're developing. They're able to bend better, move better, explode. And I think it's going to make them just better or more productive football players, not to mention increase their durability. That's a big part of this thing. We have to increase our ability to be able to withstand the rigors of the season, and this will help that a whole bunch.
Kind of like last year's spring football format, will there be any fully open practices for fans and also any practices held outside of Eugene, like last year's Jesuit?
We will. We'll have another one in Portland. I believe Franklin High School is when we'll be traveling over there. I'm still trying to figure out the rest of the dynamic. We will have some open practices. Obviously, the spring game is always open, but there'll be a lot of similarities in that respect.